Well, we have a school that is Harris Westminster Sixth Form, and it was built around the idea that learning is amazing, and that if you truly believe that learning is amazing, then everything else in education follows. And a few years in, we were working with the students and finding that some of them were really embracing the idea, and some of them were finding it more difficult. That what they lacked was a sense of curiosity, a belief in the power of questions. And so we wanted to develop that in them. And so I put together a course that I called the Cabinet of Curiosity, with the idea being that if I taught them to be curious, if I showed them that asking questions was worthwhile and fun, then they would become more curious. Well, originally the Cabinet of Curiosity was a Renaissance idea, a Kunstkammer, a chamber of curios that was put together by wealthy and intellectual Renaissance princes and lesser nobles, partly as a sort of propaganda to say how clever they were and how wealthy and how well-travelled. And they would visit each other and they would see each other's narwhal horns and not believe each other's stories that they were unicorns. And this is sort of how some of that natural science began. As far as I'm concerned, the spark for the Cabinet of Curiosity came from a painting by Domenico Remps, which is sort of late 17th century, that has this picture of a cabinet rather than a room, but filled with weird and wonderful things from around the world. Well, as I say, some of them took to it like a duck to water. They were really enthusiastic and embraced this idea and were just delighted that to be given permission to ask questions and to find out more and to learn. Some of them found that more challenging. They didn't really get it. They felt that it wasn't for them, or that it might be ideally for them, but it was something that was extra, something that they didn't have to take part in. And so there were these barriers and this resistance to really embracing what I wanted them to. I think the first one is they think it's bad manners to ask questions. And I think that comes from a variety of different cultures. I mean, it's said that children should be seen and not heard. I don't think that's true, but that is an idea that they come with. And if they come from a school that has been focused on exam outcomes rather than on learning more generally, and there's a lot of pressure for schools to be focused on exam outcomes, and qualifications are important, then questions that are off-piste can be responded with, well, you don't need to know that. And students don't want to cause trouble. They want to please their teachers most of the time, most of them, and so they don't ask questions. I think some of them see it as extra work. Why would I go and ask questions that aren't going to give me qualifications, that aren't leading to where I need to do, that aren't the minimum required to please my teachers? It's just more, isn't it? And some of them feel that it's a luxury, that it's not really for them, that what they need to do is just ignore this, and maybe different groups of students like this kind of thing, and that's okay, but for them, no. That's a big question. I think that the first thing is that to get an A star, you have to go beyond the right answer and get to being clever. And that curiosity takes you some of the way to being clever. And part of the reason that is that it moves you towards independence, that this breadth of knowledge that goes beyond the minimum requirement, that sees the syllabus as the centre of something that is much bigger, that's there to explore, means that it invites students in and gives them the tools required to be different, to be interesting, to be clever. And finally, I think it's kind of a rejection of the idea that there is just one right answer, that there is just one way of doing it. And it sees learning as more amazing than qualifications, and it sees learning as fun, as a delight, as an opportunity, rather than something you have to do to tick some boxes. I think the first thing is to model that. So I am a mathematician. This is well known. If you cut me, I bleed numbers. And you might expect mathematicians to be the most linear and self-centered of intellectuals. I mean, you don't need anything to do maths except a sharp pencil and plenty of paper. But I demonstrate that I am interested in things that go well beyond that, into poetry and history and art and music. And I talk enthusiastically about those things, and I ask questions about it. And I think you also give students permission and encouragement. So we have essay competitions at school, and students are invited to write about things that are not on their syllabus. And they're told to develop their hinterland, that space of knowledge that goes beyond the core requirements. Yeah, so I think that we might start with British politics. That's not where the course starts. The course starts with mathematics. I talk about what happened in the elections between the first one I remember, 1979, when Margaret Thatcher came to power, and the first one I was able to vote in, 1997, when Blair came into power. And I talk about it through the eyes of the small boy that was growing up. So this is a very idiosyncratic history. It makes no effort to be authoritative or to cover everything. I pick out the things that I remember from the time and talk about them in the way that I remember them. And I think that's important because it makes connections, it makes an interesting story. The students are interested in me because I'm their teacher, and they're always interested in what goes on behind that. But it doesn't feel self-indulgent. I'm not telling my story, I'm telling the story of Thatcher and Major, her successor. And I think that it encourages that thinking of the borders between things, and encourages them to ask questions. And I think the best thing about this session is I am not telling them to follow my footsteps. I don't think they should get interested in the Falkland War because you can count the casualties and you're a 7-year-old mathematician. So I don't think they should follow my footsteps, but I do think they should follow up on their own interests, on the ideas that seem amusing and open to them as they go through their lives, and that current affairs, politics is worth being interested in. So that's one of them. Another is my art appreciation session, and I think that high culture can seem forbidding, particularly to young people. But art is delightfully easy access because you can look at the paintings and you can say what it is you want to say. So I show them landscapes by Constable and Turner, and I encourage them to be very interactive in that session. So one of the great games of that session is this painting the same guy or is it a different guy? And we start off with 4 paintings of Constable, and first of all they say, oh, it's bound to be a different guy because it looks different. And then the third one they're going, okay, this kind of, it definitely looks different. The similarities that we found between the first two, they're not here. Different guy, you're going, well, it's the same guy. And the fourth one, they're thinking, it must be a different guy by now. I mean, he's just messing with us. It's the same guy again. And then we go on to 4 Turner paintings. And that gives them that opportunity to engage. They have to engage in the same guy, different guy game, because I make them. I mean, as you say, you have to point to one side of the room or the other. You have to have a vote, and it's so easy to have a guess, and there's so low stakes. There's no loss for being wrong, that they are involved, and then they have an opportunity to share their views and say what they think and why they thought it was a different person, and what they like about this one, and I tell them what I like and what I've picked out. So that is opening an amazing world and encouraging them to believe that high culture belongs to them as much as it belongs to anyone else. And the third that I want to tell you about today is that Yeats poem. And it's a very famous poem called The Second Coming. And it goes, turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the centre cannot hold, mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are filled with passionate intensity. And goes on, as in another stanza and a half, but we have limited time today. And I think that poetry is a core part of the GCSE curriculum, but it's a core part in that you have an anthology that you're expected to learn, and you have a list of responses that you're expected to give. And there isn't as much opportunity to share the joy of poetry as I think there should be. And there's a quote I use in the book from Molesworth, which is a 1950s school humour book, that talks about sometimes the English teachers will read poetry and they will say the weedy words. And Fotherington Thomas loves it, and when he says that he wanders lonely as a cloud, you think he will float off into the sky. Chiz, chiz. And I think that I want students to think it isn't just English teachers. It isn't just weedy words. These are real ideas. These are beautiful words. It isn't floating off into the sky. It's engaging with reality. And The Second Coming is fantastic for that, because it leads to ideas of religion and politics and history and geography. It was written during and maybe as a result of the Spanish flu, which has echoes in COVID-19, which has, of course, affected their lives. And that's a session where it feels like the brakes come off. That's the session where, instead of me telling them about maths and sharing what I know and feeling confident that whatever they ask, I'll have the answer, now they could ask anything, and none of the questions am I the expert for. And there is something really joyful in that sense that we are all just stepping into the unknown, and expecting to find interesting things, and expecting it to make sense, and expecting to learn. I think there are a few reasons. I think the first one is that when I'm teaching maths, I can have my brain on other things. I can have my brain on the students in the class, in getting to know them, rather than worrying about the content, rather than worrying about explaining things clearly. I'm not sure what this means. Can I remember this detail? I know what I'm talking about when it's maths. I think that there is that confidence. You're going into talking about the unknown. That's kind of the whole thing about curiosity. If I wasn't modelling things I didn't know about, I wouldn't be modelling curiosity. I'd be modelling knowing the right answers, and that's not what it's about. But that's a bit scary, particularly as a teacher where you're used to being the authority in the room. And so being able to settle myself a bit, being able to feel, yeah, I know what's going on, I know the answers to this one, and then maybe next time there'll be questions I don't know the answer to. And I think that's important not just for me, but for the class. So they are going to be asking questions to which I don't know the answer, and I don't want this to feel pointless. I don't want this to feel like, well, nobody knows anything here, it doesn't matter, there aren't right answers, you can say what you like. I want them to believe that I do know some stuff. And the point is not that I'm clueless, but that there is stuff that everyone doesn't know, or rather that everyone has things that they don't know. And that asking questions about the things you don't know doesn't mean you don't know anything, it just means you don't know this. Well, with curiosity, I am interested, and I try to be interested in whatever there is going on, whatever subject it is, whatever body of knowledge there is available. I would like to know more about it. And with that curiosity comes an expectation that it will make sense, that the answers will fit together with what I already know in the world. And if it doesn't make sense, then I haven't asked the right questions, or it hasn't been explained to me in the right way yet. And I just need to carry on being curious until I get there. I think that I go into these things with a degree of humility, and I think that's really important. These aren't my specialist subjects. I don't know as well as the person who I'm asking the questions of what the answers are. But I would like to. I would like you to explain it to me, and people like to explain the things that they know, and I like to have it explained to me, and then to make sense of it and make explanations. And I think curiosity and joy and enthusiasm is what I'm trying to model, that this is an adventure, that it's a big world. I say curiosity is a superpower, and I think it is a superpower because it opens a virtuous circle, that you ask questions and you get answers. And what you get from those answers is an understanding that there is more that you didn't know, that there is more that you don't understand. There are more questions that you should ask. And so because you ask questions, because you got some answers, you ask more questions and get more answers and become more knowledgeable and more able to shape the world around you. Well, I'd like teachers who read it to believe that curiosity is a superpower, and to think, why wouldn't I want my students to have this? Why wouldn't I want to share that idea with them? And I hope there is enough in the book to convince teachers that teaching curiosity is a good thing, a worthwhile thing, a possible thing, and enough handholds to put together their own course. And I've described mine, and there's a lot of resources in the book to use, to copy and take the sessions that I've used. But any sharing of curiosity is essentially idiosyncratic, as I pointed out with my politics session. So I hope that they will have confidence to add their own content. Parents, I hope, will think it's worth reading. I hope the chapters are interesting and contain information and explanations that make sense and are fun to read. And I hope that it will encourage them to share a love of reading with their young people, and to share a love of questions with their young people. Students reading it, well, I hope they learn a lot. And I hope that they learn that asking questions is a good thing, and that the world should make sense. And finally, if there are any politicians reading it, I hope they reflect that Yeats says, things fall apart, the centre cannot hold. Maybe questions, curiosity can put it back together again. And most importantly, I think education is the silver bullet, and that's what I'd like politicians reading to take out.